Hello everybody, today I'll be reading this book called The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, and it's by F Scott Fitzgerald, illustrations by Caliph Brown, and it's now a major motion picture, so let's just excuse me for that. Alright, so we are going to continue these pages to chapter 1, which is in page 5, where this man is running, and it's an illustration, so let's start. As long ago as 1860, it was a proper thing to be born at home. At present, so I am told, the high gods of medicine have decreed that the first cries of young shall be uttered upon the anaesthetic air of a hospital, preferably a fashionable one. So young Mr. and Mrs. Roger Button were 50 years ahead of the style when they decided one day in the summer of 1860 that their first baby should be born in a hospital. Whether this anachronism had any bearing upon the astonishing history I am about to set down will never be known. I shall tell you what occurred and let you judge for yourself. The Roger Buttons held an invaluable position, both social and financial, in antebellum Baltimore. They were related to this family and the that family, which, as every Southerner knew, entitled them to membership in that enormous peerage which largely polluted the Confederacy. This was their first experience with the charming old custom of having babies. Mr. Button was naturally nervous. He hoped it would be a boy so that he could be sent to Yale College in Connecticut, at which institution Mr. Button himself had been known for 4 years by the somewhat obvious nickname of Cough. On the December morning consecrated to an enormous event, he arose nervously at 6 o'clock, dressed himself, adjusted an impeccable stock, and hurried forth to the streets of Baltimore to the hospital to determine whether the darkness of the night had reborn in a new life upon his bosom. Now we're on page 6. When he was approximately 100 yards from the Maryland Private Hospital for ladies and gentlemen, he saw Dr. Keene, the family physician, descending the front steps, rubbing his hands together with a washing movement, as all doctors are required to do by the unwritten ethics of their profession. Mr. Roger Button, the president of Roger Button and Co. Wholesale Hardware, began to run toward Dr. Keene, with much less dignity than was expected from a Southern gentleman of the picturesque period. "Dr. Keene!" he called. "Oh, Dr. Keene!" The doctor heard him, faced around, and stood waiting, a curious expression settling on his harsh, medicinal face as Mr. Button drew near. "What happened?" demanded Mr. Button as he came up in a gasping rush. "What was it? How is she? A boy? Who is it? What?" "Talk sense," said Dr. Keene sharply. He appeared somewhat irritated. "Is the child born?" begged Mr. Button. Dr. Keene frowned. "Why, yes, I suppose so, after a fashion." Again he threw a curious glance at Mr. Button. "Is my wife all right?" "Yes. Is it a boy or girl?" "Here now," cried the Dr. Keene in a perfect passion of irritation, "I'll ask you to go and see for yourself." Outrageous! He snapped the last words out in almost one syllable, then he turned away, muttering, "Do you imagine a case like this will happen my professional reputation? One more would ruin anybody." "What's the matter?" demanded Mr. Button, appealed. "Triplets?" "No, not triplets," answered the doctor kindly. "What's more, you can go and see for yourself. And get another doctor. I brought you into the world, young man, and I've been physician to your family for 40 years, but I'm through with you. I don't want to see you or any of your relatives ever again. Goodbye." Then he turned sharply, and without another word, climbed into his phaeton, which was waiting at the curbstone, and drove sleepily away. Mr. Button stood there upon the sidewalk, stupefied and trembling from head to foot. What horrible mishap had occurred? He had suddenly lost all desire to go into the Maryland Private Hospital for ladies and gentlemen. It was the greatest difficulty that a moment later he forced himself to mount the steps and enter the front door. A nurse was sitting behind a desk in the opposite gloom of the hall. Swallowing his shame, Mr. Button approached her. "Good morning," she remarked, looking up at him pleasantly. "Good morning. I am Mr. Button." At this look of utter terror spread itself over the girl's face. She rose to her feet and seemed about to fly from the hall, restraining herself only with the most apparent difficulty. And there will be a part 2, so this is page 8, and we'll read it in part 2. Have a nice day, and this was the curious case of Benjamin Button. Part 2 is coming up. That's part 1. Thank you.